Hello and welcome, everyone. Before we dive in, a quick note about SudoTalks. Bryce, if you could go to the next slide. At Addigy, we eat, sleep, and breathe Apple, and that's why we created SudoTalks, a monthly webinar series where Apple experts break down the latest changes impacting IT admins. Every month, we deliver actionable insights to help you stay ahead in managing Apple devices. Today's session is all about Declarative Device Management, DDM, and we have a lot to cover. So we want to get started as soon as possible. Let's move on to the next slide, Bryce. And yeah, thanks to everyone for participating in the chat. Looks like we do have the chat working. I'm going to test it. Hello from Chicago. And hello, Mark. I want to mention that Apple has big plans for DDM, but today we're focusing on one of the most critical areas, and that is OS updates. We'll primarily discuss macOS, but keep in mind that DDM-based OS updates also apply to iOS and iPadOS. And Bryce, I understand tvOS is still MDM.
That's correct. And we won't forget tvOS. We'll talk very, very briefly about it.
Yeah. And while DDM is evolving, MDM still plays a key role, as Bryce just mentioned, in keeping Apple devices up to date. We'll break down why that is later in the presentation. So very quickly, I'm Ben Greiner. I'm excited to welcome you to today's SudoTalk. At Addigy, we know that Apple device management is about more than just keeping devices running. It's about the people who use them. Our job is to ensure those devices stay secure, compliant, and always in the desired state without extra effort for IT teams. And when I say desired state, I mean the devices, not the people using them. Though let's be honest, that would be nice if we could do that too. That's why DDM is a game changer for Apple admins. Apple's shift to a declarative model means that essential data is kept secure even without internet connectivity. And from a user's perspective, it provides a much more responsive experience. It's a huge leap forward from traditional MDM. And if you're managing Apple devices, you need to know how to take advantage of it. To guide us through this, I'm joined by Bryce Carlson, a true expert in Apple device management and also a true expert in DDM. I think Bryce has spent a lot of time on DDM.
Yeah, you say eat, sleep, and breathe. That's what I do.
That's what you do in DDM style. So today, Bryce will walk us through, and Bryce, let's go to the next slide. He'll walk us through the different types of OS updates, the end user and admin experience. We have some videos and screen grabs to share, best practices and more. And of course, we'll wrap up with a live Q&A. So start thinking about your questions, post them in the Zoom Q&A so we don't lose track of them. And bonus, for those who completed the survey, stay until the end for a chance to win a set of AirPods Pro. You must be present to win. All right, let's get started. Bryce, over to you.
Yeah. And I made another slide just to remind people, please use the Q&A. Please use the Q. Chat is going by so quickly, I can barely keep track of it as I'm talking. So please do put anything you want in the Q&A, and I'll try and answer some of those live as we go. I'll point out when we're getting up to points where we might be covering that, and then obviously we'll have the dedicated Q&A time at the end. So let's get into the meat and potatoes. So there's three types of updates is what you really need to understand. And there's MDM updates, which is kind of the first thing that made this big change from using the binary-based updates. And we'll talk about timeline and all that actually towards the end of the session. But the MDM updates now apply to macOS 12 through 13, iOS 9 and up, iPadOS 13 and up, and then tvOS 12 and up. And actually, tvOS, there is no declarative way of doing that yet. We think that that'll be coming fairly soon. It seems, based off of some of the stuff we were looking at in developer documentation, that that's probably something that's going to happen this year, we would assume. We'll see, though. But the MDM updates, while they do apply to these specific versions for what we're talking about today, you could utilize them on macOS 14 and 15 and the other OSs around that if you wanted to by turning declarative off. I would point out that well over 70%, I think it's even maybe over 80% of all the customers globally of Addigy are using declarative for macOS 14 and up for those versions. It was on by default starting last year if you're a new customer. If you're an existing customer, you would have, from that point in 2023 or end of 2023, start of 2024, you would have had to opt into that. So you could still use those MDM updates, but frankly, the prompting and the user experience is far superior on both different flavors of declarative we'll be talking about. So with that said,
Bryce, speaking of that,
yep,
I'm going to launch a quick poll
sure.
asking the audience how they currently manage OS updates. So while Bryce continues to talk through this, please answer those questions just so we can get an idea.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. And that's, yeah. And like I said, a lot are using the declarative where the devices support it. That's also not to say that you don't have a mix of it, because if you have devices that are like the very first touch bar Intel MacBook Pros that have the no escape key, which no thank you, but if you have those are limited to macOS 13. So you're going to have those that, yes, there's still some patches and things coming out with that. So that's going to be a scenario, that you'll have a mixture where you have both MDM and declarative going out. So the next then version that Apple released would be the declarative updates via enforcement specific. And that's actually the name of what that declaration that's going down to the device is. That's going to be macOS 14 and up, iOS and iPadOS 17 and up. Then the latest that came out at WWDC last year is the new global settings declaration for updates, which is going to be macOS 15 and up, and iOS and iPadOS 18 and up. And what that's doing is basically giving even more control device side, as we'll talk about. So a quick breakdown, just because it's nice to see that visually. You're going to have your macOS 14 and up with declarative for your major and minor OS updates. macOS 15, of course, has that global settings available that you can use, or you can use enforcement specific. That is something you can toggle right in the policy settings like we'll be talking about. Then you have Safari that's going to be only pushed through MDM updates. Those are not bundled with the OS, as you may know, with macOS, whereas iOS and iPadOS, Safari is part of that IPSW installer of the OS, or in the scenario of just doing an over-the-air upgrade, it's being bundled with that. Xprotect definitions and other things, you remember the old combo updaters of security updates, all of those things would be still an MDM route. And of course, across the board, Apple Apps is going to be MDM for everything because that's currently only functioning through MDM. But we do have some testing going on with declarative, still early access side from Apple on that. Same thing for iOS 17 and iPadOS 17, declarative for the major minors, and the other versions are still using MDM. So with that said,
yeah, pretty
yeah.
straightforward. Just print that out and post it on your in your
Oh
cubicle.
yeah, and it is in the KB,
cubicle.
and we'll be talking about the KB links at the end.
And the poll results, we got 47% mix of both, which is not which is expected. You still need a mix of both, really. And then 8% don't have a formal update process. I recommend you start one after today's talk. Okay, thanks, Bryce.
Yeah. So with that said, what does this look like and what are you going to be setting for these? So I'm now going to talk about just the comparison between them and what maybe is a best fit for you, might not be a best fit for others. And then we'll get into actually what we've seen work the best as values that customers have set or that we are actually using internally with all of our production devices that I'm talking to you on right now. So MDM updates, that first version of that, like I said, for those earlier versions, there's not that much to control with it because what's effectively happening is you're sending a command at that point in time when that policy runs, or if you do it via go live, and you're saying, go do this update for this version right now. The only thing that you really have control over is what version you're sending, and then the install option method, which is going to be default, where you're going to get that little pop-up that you're seeing in that looping video in the lower corner there, where basically once it's prepared, it's ready, your device is going to say, hey, do you want to reboot? Otherwise, I'm going to reboot in 60 seconds, or you can click in it and go into system settings and pause that for a little bit. But basically, that's default. Install later is going to give you that deferral option in the upper corner there in the upper right, where you send a value of X number of times they can defer from when that is marshaled out, and the device kind of keeps track of that. Frankly, there was a lot of Apple feedback tickets that we opened because it did not actually ever do anything. Um, Unless obviously they went into system settings and smashed the install and gave it that authentication for the bootstrap token. And, okay, great. Now the device is going to go and do that. But users don't really do that because they are doing their work. They're not doing updates. And then the last option would be the install force restart, where basically it's just going to go when it's ready, which it does. I would say it's about just as successful as the default, but frankly, give them a 60-second warning and let it do its thing anyway then. The only other thing would be install force restart can blow by certain things that are open. But obviously, just like anything else, with the consumer level update on your device, if you are saying, hey, I have a Zoom call and a screen share and an open Word document that's unsaved as a draft, like certain things, or like mail, the one that I always get stuck with is that mail is still trying to update its database before quitting the app, and it gets stuck and you have to force quit it before it reboots. Install force restart can get around some of those things. I don't recall exactly there, but basically it gets around some of those options. Now, like I
Okay, we
said,
we have one
yep.
more poll. Well, we've got a few polls, but the next one is about deferrals, although it's a little different than what Bryce was just talking about. As an admin, are you still deferring, um, giving your users the ability to upgrade major OSs?
Mhm.
So I just launched that poll. Thanks for everyone for participating. Um, I know this is always a challenge for us when I ran my MSP. We would often defer because there were a lot of workflows that really would break if people upgraded before they were
Mhm.
ready. But security is really forcing us to keep these devices up to date. So we have a bit of a challenge there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let
And
that
like
poll
you and I
run.
were
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you and I were talking yesterday when we were doing some dry runs, like you might have hardware bound devices that you have to stick on a version. I know that from when I was an admin myself before I came into the MDM space almost a decade ago now. We had a spectral analysis machine at the university. Thing was like 100 grand. We're not
Yeah.
getting a new one of those, so let's keep some old Macs around. It's kind of
Yeah.
the scenario we have with that.
Yeah, we had some strange situations with Adobe workflows and barcodes where users needed to keep old machines, and if
Mhm.
they could not upgrade them, if they did, it would just break the entire workflow.
Yeah. Or the other one I just remembered is like we have literally a customer of Addigy that we were talking with just the other week, that they have devices that they're stuck on 13 because they do an encoding process with for local TV stations. It's all hardware
Mhm.
bound equipment. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're not replacing that. So let's buy some old Macs on eBay. It's kind of their modus
Yeah,
operandi.
but most of your standard business users
Yeah.
upgrade, yeah, right away, I would say, but for the most
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about some values when we get to what people are setting and what we're seeing success with when we get to a little bit later in the presentation. So with that said about the MDM updates, if you're going into Go Live on the devices page and going into the updates tab, that's going to be MDM updates regardless of if the device is on 12, 13, 14, or 15, because you're not going to be sending a declaration for a specific date and time and saying go do that, like Go Live, the whole purpose of that in there is saying I want to go do this right now, go do that update. That's sending that MDM command. The declaration is, the theory behind it from how Apple has it structured is you give it an install date and time in the future. The device has time to prepare it, get it ready, and then it will go and do that. And then, as we'll talk about with the new global settings, it's even more so that with machine learning, where it's saying, okay, I want to automatically update after the deferral period is up of 30 days. Let me get it downloaded. Let me get it ready. Okay, over these next 30 days, when is the device best suited to do that? I'll go do that then. And we'll talk about some of the different criteria you need to meet for that to actually function on that end. So within Go Live, if you'd go send that out, that's going to go do that MDM command on any of those flavors of macOS because it's sending that command at that point in time for that version. If you were to go and click on the OS version in the upper part of the Go Live information page, it's going to show you the display status of what each of those updates is doing across those different flavors. Or in the case of if you just sent it through MDM, it's going to show that there. You could also go into the policy settings if you were sending an MDM update or a DDM update out via a policy. and you could see, okay, what version am I sending? Great. What devices, if I click on that, I'll expand it and see all the different devices. What state is it at? And when was that last updated from the device? So it's kind of a way to get a view into all of the devices that are running declarations or MDM commands there. So that's MDM updates, but frankly, declarations is, like we said, where it's going. And very much so, as we'll talk about with global settings, where Apple is choosing to not fight upstream against the consumer side of the house, as it was phrased to us internally. So the enforcement specific declaration came out 2 WWDCs ago. And what you're doing there is we're sending a specific version, build, and the install time for that, as well as we can now send, this was released after WWDC, a URL that would say, give the end user something clickable within the system settings or settings app when they're looking at that update, if they choose to click on that notification center notification. So with this, you're setting how many days after the release of the update do you want that device to update, and at what time in the 24-hour clock machine time. This is not your admin portal time. This is machine time, because basically what's happening is we're sending to the device, go and do this at this time, and it's going to do it when that device's internal clock reaches that point in time, and that update's prepared and ready. And then we added a little bit more logic on the Addigy side, where you can have an enforcement day and a block off period, where you're basically saying this is a safe space for this to run, or don't run between this date and this date with the block off period. Major request from finance and retail, where they wanted to have a change control window that nothing can be run on the devices, set it in the policy, and that'll inherit down on that. So you're saying with those enforcement days, I want the update to run on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, meaning that let's say 7 days after the release is Tuesday. Well, it's not going to go on Tuesday then. It would actually go on Thursday at that first available time of noon device time, basically shifting that window down. So that way you're not beholden to when Apple is publishing that update, and it might not be within your change control or update window period you're giving users. And then finally, the last thing is that URL, and where that shows in the system settings is actually right in the updates pane. In macOS, it shows in the same spot as well, right there. It is clickable. However, as a disclaimer, I don't have the feedback number handy. It broke at some point within macOS after 14.5. It is still broken in macOS 14 and the earlier versions of 15. I have a feedback ticket open with Apple right now. When you click it, you get a -50 error from macOS. It doesn't know how to route you to the browser, even if it's set to Safari as the default browser. So it's there, and it was a great idea in theory, but currently that is broken from the Apple side. That URL, it's there, it looks like it's clickable, it's blue, but it doesn't do anything at this point in time. So what does that look like device side? Well, if they were to go and get that notification, they're going to say, do I want to have the update go now? If they are in a time and space where they can do that, or they can look at details of that update, and that's where they'd see that URL there. If they want, go ahead, click the update button, it would go and do it, or they can just dismiss it. And when the time comes, they'll get prompted again and again as they get closer to that time window for that update period. Once you get within the 24 hours of the enforcement time, you're going to get a notification at the top of every hour. And once you get within 60 minutes, I believe it's every 10 minutes. I know for sure it's 10 minutes before the update enforces, and then you get the 60-second countdown as well. So that's what it looks like on user side, but what do you as an admin see? So again, if you were to click on the OS version in that system status modal, you'd see, okay, it's started, it's downloading. Is it prepared? Is it ready to go? And that's going to happen. It's going to check that off as those items come through with the update brain service, which is a service directly on the device that's caching it. And then also as well, when the software update daemon is ready to go and do that. If you click on the pending update version there, and that will take you to that modal, that will list out the version that is pending, why it's pending, if it's from a declaration or not, or an MDM command, and it's going to mirror that status you're seeing in the other modal because it's the same information stream that we're getting from the device side effectively. And this is something we've added in just the past month where we actually list out the reasons around what the device is sending back, where it's giving us what is the methodology and what is causing that enforcement of that update. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, as well as share a link to the Apple KB that lists out all those reasons, and also where you can see that in the events page too when we're looking at it. So that update, once that is done downloading, you're going to see it switch to prepared. And once it's switched to prepared, that means that it's in the folder under, it's either var ZZ or library updates, wherever it's caching that. It's a couple different locations for different types of updates. But it's caching it on the device, it's downloaded, it's ready to go, and then it will go ahead and do that when that countdown reaches that point. Once that finishes, then you're going to actually see, okay, yep, I got that declaration, it was applied to it, it's downloading on the device, it will go and do that. And then this is what I was talking about, where once that's completed and the device reboots and it's now on that version, you will actually see within the events on the device within Addigy, you go in and look at, okay, this device completed the update to 15.1 or 15.3. Well, why is it? Well, the top one there is saying this update was installed with the system settings, meaning that it was clicked on within the system settings app, or it was a declaration. It let the countdown happen, and the end user had the update take place. That QR code on screen will take you to that web link there, which is for the glossary from Apple. It's a little bit down the page. It's a few sections in, but that has all the different things that are within that. And I'm going to put it on screen here on the next slide. And then that was added fairly recently with that release on the Addigy side. So the reasons you could get for that would be, again, system settings like we saw there, as well as declaration on the bottom. But there's a bunch of different things in between there. It could be install tonight, meaning that the end user deferred to an install tonight action with the global settings that you would be seeing in just a little bit. Could also be that it was an automatic update triggered by automatic actions. Notification would mean that they got the notification, and when they click that little details button, they could click update right there, and that's going to be a notification installation then. Setup Assistant would be if that was triggered during Setup Assistant. We do have a key within automated device enrollment where that can be sent, and that update would have been completed before the device ever actually enrolls there. Command line would be if they use the command line tool, and MDM would be if it's an MDM command. And so it's just something that it can help you understand where the device got updated and how, because maybe the end user went in and clicked it early because they had seen that in system settings if you weren't deferring or blocking, like we're going to be talking about in a couple slides. So the new flavor of the day, which is global settings, would be macOS 15, iOS and iPadOS 18 and up. And this is a little bit of a different way of doing it versus MDM and the enforcement specific declaration. Because MDM within Addigy, down at the bottom of the page there, which is a schedule for just MDM, or when you're sending it within Go Live, you're saying, go do this at this time right now when I'm sending it or when the policy deploys. In enforcement specific, you're saying, go do this X number of days after the publication date at this time. And it's going to say, okay, I'm going to go do it at this time. And as long as the device is online, charged, has enough free space, and gets it downloaded, which I know is a lot of different things to meet, it's going to go and do it at that point in time. Global settings is different. You're basically saying, hey, go do this after you get past the deferrals when you feel like you can do it. And there's a link I'll be sending that is part of the Appleseed for IT program, their internal beta program, where they have a very good PDF that is sadly NDA'd through that program that explains a lot of how it functions. And I'll share a little bit of it in just a bit. But basically what you're saying is if the device has enough state of charge, if the update is prepared and ready, if you're after the deferral period and the user doesn't have anything open that it can't bring back with a restore of the session, just like if you leave that checkbox checked when you go and do a reboot, you're effectively saying, go and do it when you feel it's best. And it's going to basically say, okay, I'm going to install this later tonight, because I've seen over the last couple of weeks or however long it's been monitoring and looking at that with the machine learning device side. It's saying, well, I know around 1 a.m. the device is in power nap. If it's a laptop where it's got the lid shut plugged into power, or it's a desktop that it's always plugged into power, and I know it's in deep sleep and has power nap on around 1 a.m. The end user's not using it, and I know that they have stuff that I, as a macOS device, can say I'll restore that session when I come back from the reboot, because it has a bootstrap token. It will do authenticated reboot and bring it right back. And they just need to put their password in one time with that authenticated reboot, and it'll be back to where they were on the desktop. So it's going to do all those things, and it's basically going to say, okay, I'm scheduling this for tonight because that's when I know I can do it. Now, if the end user were to click into that notification, like you'll see in this clip here, they'll say, okay, yeah, 15.11 scheduled for tonight. If they click into there, they'll see in system settings in software update that if they click more info, it's going to say, well, it's going to try and do this tonight automatically. If they really wanted to, you could cancel that scheduled update. So it's not going to do that device side, but it's going to just do that in the background. And then once that actually takes place, device side, it's going to just come back to that desktop right where they were and restore their session. On the test device that I had, I set up a couple devices of Silicon and Intel. This one was a virtual machine where if I look in system settings and look at the device report, I can see that, yeah, I installed at 1:19 a.m. and I had just set this value to 1 day after release. But it took a couple days for this VM of being stood up online and running for it to figure out when it wanted to go. So it didn't just go 1 day after. It was figuring out, okay, this seems to be a good time to go and do it. I'll do it then. And so we saw that in the installed update. I was saying, okay, yep, it's got a notification because I had clicked into that and gone in there and looked at it. So it goes, okay, well, they've been notified. I'm going to go ahead and do this. And it completes that installation. And then as soon as that comes back from reboot, Addigy will get that response back, basically saying, okay, the device went and did this update. It's completed from that global setting. So you're gaining some of that Apple-esque very streamlined end user experience. And really, the internal explanation from Apple on this is, the consumer side, they try and have a really good, seamless, automatic experience for those updates. Why fight uphill against that with using these via declaration? Why not give the controls of deferral and those items to that and allow the device to make that determination device side, just like it does for a consumer update? That's not to say that you can't use enforcement specific on 15. We'll have a flow chart and I'll show how you can do that on those devices. So you'd say, okay, go do it at this date and time. Because me as a former admin, I look at it both ways. I can see how this would work for some, but not work for others. To speak to a little bit more of what you need to have device side, the URL on the page there, and I'll put it in the chat here as well. If you are a member of the Appleseed for IT or Education program, which I highly, highly recommend it, which there's two links, one, how you can get the information for the program, and then also the link to this PDF itself, which is under the resources within that. This is the requirements that it's looking for power and free space. The free space one is whatever. It's just saying it needs to have enough free space to do the update. I know when I was an admin, I had a number of users that never had more than 10 gigs free. So that's going to be a problem in this scenario for sure. But the power requirements is it's higher for Intel because it's going to be a little bit more intensive. The Silicon Macs have a little bit lower power requirement. And we do have this listed out in our own writing in the Addigy KB that we'll be sharing a link to at the end of it as well. But bottom line, 50% power or greater. My Intel Mac that had it still has a battery that says service because it's an older battery in that Intel Mac. It would only do it with 100%, and that's I didn't see that documented anywhere on the Apple side, but because the battery could lose its voltage or clean state of charge where it's ready to go and has enough power, it just wouldn't do the update unless it was at 100% with the global settings enabled there. So
Bryce, just to clarify, it looks like with Apple Silicon Macs, you don't need as much battery minimum. Like
correct.
minimum's only
Yeah.
20%. Another
And
incentive to get off Intel. I think.
Yeah, and I will say this because when we were launching this in December, I was testing constantly with Intel and Silicon. The Intel devices, when they go, it did wake me up one night from one room over because it went full space shuttle status with the fans at
Fans.
full tilt. And it takes, I was looking at the logs, which I'll show some examples when we get to towards the end here. It takes a good long while for the Intel ones to update, which it did seem that those seemed to go in the wee hours of the morning, again, that 1 a.m., 2 a.m., just because I think it was like, I need a lot of time to finish this. Whereas some of
Mhm.
the silicon devices, I saw them going sometimes even in, just after out of business hours. Like it knew after like 6 p.m. the device wasn't on or being used, it was just plugged into power and they would go. So the
Yeah.
Intel ones seem to be more cautious. And again, Apple doesn't give much more guidance than what's in this PDF, but uh, bottom line is it's you have it charged is really what it comes down to.
And upgrade to silicon, I would
And
say.
upgrade to silicon,
Yeah.
which the M4 MacBook Airs just came out, I think, yesterday or today. So yeah, another reason. I finally got off my Intel personally, but I was 10 years old to begin with. So those are the three flavors. What do we see that actually works? Because that's what people actually care about is getting it updated. And there's different release cadences you could have with that too. The values that I've seen the best success with MDM updates is default. And then there's also the resend option within Addigy. And that's something that we built in where basically, if we don't see that the device completed the update because it got stuck or for whatever reason, which we're going to talk about stuck updates in just a couple slides, if for whatever reason it got stuck, send the command again. Default's 24 hours. I've seen better success with 12 to 6 hours, just because you're hitting it maybe twice within that business day where the device is online or it's in powered on and in sleeping. So that's what we've seen best there. Again, you could do the install later and install force restart, but the install later on MDM updates, uh, I've seen it work a handful of times, if that. We used to use it internally. We went away from it just because it the device would sit there, it would get to the end of it. We have a number of Apple feedbacks open where it would get through all five prompts. We'd give it, okay, update, okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then when it gets to one, the counter stops and it just keeps saying the one, you get one more deferral. Um, and then we went to declarative after that. So we haven't really used it past that on 14 or 15 internally. Enforcement specific declaration. 7 to 14 days is quite common. That, as you can see, actually, with the poll, I think that we have up right now, out of the 143 respondents on the poll, 1 to 30 days was 38% of them, the poll we just did. So, like right there, again, 7 to 14 is really that sweet spot. Especially when we get into some of these release cadences, like with 17.4, where there's been 17.4.1, 2, 3, and 4. So you have all of these different updates, and they're all some of them 0-day exploits that you want to get patched. Well, you want to get that installed sooner rather than later. As far as time, end of business day or a change control window. End of business day seems to be when most people are doing it, but then they're setting it to a schedule of all days of the week. Is what I've seen the most success with. And then the helper URL, I guess I did put the feedback in there. I have seen a lot of customers include that helper URL, even though, like I said, that feedback number there on screen, it doesn't, it's not clickable. Once it is clickable, that would be nice because sometimes people that are inquisitive will go in there and click on it. You could, as a number of customers have done, include a generic KB, not for every update, but just a generic like, hey, this is updates. This is what our IT department, or if you're an MSP, this is what the managing company has for information. Here's some visuals explaining what happens. And I would encourage you all to please put it in there, try and click it, grab a sysdiagnose, and send an Apple feedback like we'll be talking about at the end, because I think it is something that would be really valuable. But if it's not clickable, it's not really giving us any value there. So enforcement, so that's enforcement specific. Global settings, where I've seen the most success is there is a value, like you will see, and actually I'll put it up on screen here. But the notifications set to all. There's an option where you can have it only show 1 hour before. Don't know why that option exists. Personally, I don't get that. I'd want more notifications, not less, but hey. There's then the key where you can enable standard users or versus admins to install those updates themselves, enabled versus disabled. Then you have the deferral, 14 days is typically what I've been seeing on that. And then the automatic actions, you're going to want that to always on because that means it's always going to go and download it, get it ready. And then after the deferral's up, it's going to go and do that automatic install when it sees that best. And then there's two values for the RSR updates for install and rollback. Have those on that way people can install them or we'll have to see that and do it. Granted, we haven't had an RSR since the great WebKit debacle of 2023 with I think it was macOS 13.4 something where they released three RSRs in a row that broke Safari and WebKit, but it's still good to have that on and enabled so you're ready. So what would that would look like in each of these? Like I said, you'd be setting it for default and 6 hours for MDM. Your enforcement declaration, if you're doing it like 14 days and say, yeah, you got the end of the week, go and set that. And then for your global settings, you're actually saying, show all those notifications, not just the ones an hour before. Allow those users to perform those major minor updates. Otherwise, this only an admin can do it. And then configuring those so that those updates will run in that automatic fashion. Bonus round, the advanced options that we have within the global settings, if you have, and this is why I talk about release cadences, if you have an internal policy for just the IT department or for yourself for testing, and you are a member of the Appleseed for IT program, which once again, I'll put it in the chat there, highly recommend it. If you join that program and you have your automated device enrollment token in your policy for doing ADE, and if you have like Apple apps, well, that's a separate token, but you have that in there. You have both those in there. And you have that ADE token that is a member of that program because you've signed up. You can have it offer you up the beta updates on your device. And it will come automatically through your system settings where you're saying, I want to always have that on and I want to have that a required program where it will show that. That's for iOS, iPadOS, and macOS. It's just one of those
Yeah,
things that
Bryce,
it's always good to test betas.
speaking of the Appleseed program, some people are saying they can't get the file, and that's because they don't have a membership in Appleseed, right? They need to sign up for Appleseed for IT, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So once you sign up for it, your automated device enrollment token, that file you get is automatically entered to it. There's no other setup you need to do other than importing that ADE token into your Addigy policy.
Yeah, so just to clarify, if anyone is clicking some of these links that Bryce has shared and you're getting the message which I got, sorry, you
Yes,
don't
the
have access to
PDF.
download this file. That's
Yep, that's why I
because,
sent those two in a row. So the
yeah,
first one would be the
yeah,
PDF. If you're a member of the program, you can get in. If you're not a member of the Appleseed program, which again, I highly, highly recommend because that's how we can help move the ball in the right direction with Apple because that feedback from that program, there's also a super secret, awesome Mac admin Slack chat room where me, my counterpart at Jamf, my counterpart at Kanji, and a few people from Mosel also hang out in there. And like when we're talking about what is broke, like we talk about that details URL, or like I'm going to talk about a different Apple thing to be aware of at the end of the slides here. We're talking about those things across vendors to share information because we want to make this better because we're all, for better or for worse, we have to use these ways of updating because that's how Apple is pushing the updates to go. And there is pros and cons to it. The binary based updates back when I was an admin, there was combo updates. It was great. You push a combo out, update out, the package runs, device is up to date. But with the different platforms of Silicon versus Intel, authenticated reboot, bootstrap token, there are ways that this is going and being able to help give the feedback and push that is a huge part of that Appleseed program. And also that what's coming then.
yeah. And Bryce, is that program free or
Mhm.
it used to be $99 a year, but is it free
That's
now?
the developer program. Yeah, the Appleseed is free, and there's two flavors. There's the EDU and for business. Yep.
Okay, so free. Everyone here should definitely get an account, whether you think you need it or not. You'll eventually
Mhm.
probably need it. So.
Exactly. Exactly. So I was checking time. Okay, so with that said, let's move on then about those best practices. And So this is a flow chart, which actually I think I saw Mike in the chat fly by while I was talking. This was shared in actually Mac Admin Slack. I put this out there this morning. This is well, it looks like an absolute nightmare. This is the workflow that Addigy is doing internally to calculate what device is going to use what type of update. So for better or for worse, we have three flavors of updates like we've been talking about today. And within Addigy, you could have devices. Some customers use Flex, where they say, all my macOS 15 devices are in this policy. All my 14 are in this policy. All my 13 are in this policy. But then you also have customers that use policy where there's a parent and a bunch of children for different organizations, and there's a mixture of devices in those. So we needed to build the updates in such a way that you could send multiple different flavors to different device types with having to only set the settings one time. And if you want to set it for each different platform, use Flex or make a separate policy for those. It's just the difference in it's a double-edged sword of what I think about it. It's the difference in that flexibility of set it and forget it for one time for all the different platforms. Or if you want to really control it, you can. You just need to put those into a specific policy with no inheritance for that. So what happens is when you hit a policy that's going to run, it's going to say, okay, what device updates are available, which that's all done through MDM, where it's going to say, okay, it's going to go out and pull and do an inventory. Okay, this is Ben's MacBook, and he has macOS 15.3.1 available. Great, okay. So I know what's stored there, and we're checking that on the device. And we're going to say, okay, what are the policy settings that are set for what policy Ben is in? And it's going to say, what's the most restrictive settings? Meaning, if you have a schedule, and most restrictive here would be the least days that it could run. So let's say in one policy, Ben is set to allow updates on Thursday, Friday, and in another one, he's only allowed to run them Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Well, the most restrictive to not interrupt Ben's work would be Friday then, because it's in both of those. So that's the day it's going to calculate to. Then it's going to say, okay, well, is Ben on macOS 12 or 13? No, he's on a newer one, so we'd go down. If he was on 12 or 13 and declarative is on, we'd go, okay, great. We're going to send a command for 13.7.9 or whatever the latest version is. It's going to go and send it. Software update daemon's going to go and run and do that download installation on the device. If he's not, it's going to say, are you on macOS 14? If he is, it's going to say, great, we're going to use an enforcement-specific ES declaration saying, this is the schedule that we're running, and this is the update that was specified that's available. Go and do it. Great. It sends that declaration to the device. The device is going to go, okay, this device is going to run at this date and time, this version. Great. Awesome. Ben will update as long as he's charged, has it downloaded, has had the internet, has power, free space. Yeah, I know there's still a lot to it, but that's what's going to go and happen on it. If he's on macOS 15 or up, then it's going to say, okay, do you have the global settings declaration keys set? Okay, yep. Are these present? Let's take a look. Notifications and the allowing the user to perform major minor, you could set and say, okay, I want to control these through global settings, and I want to keep the device updated to latest. Okay, great. Go and send that as an enforcement specific if I don't have that set. Meaning, let's say I want to hold him to 15.3 instead of 15.3.1, and I have that set in the top where I want to keep the device up to the latest. If I'm holding him at 15.3, it's going to go, okay, well, I can't do the global settings automatic actions because device side is controlling that. There's no setting within the global settings to use the new magic auto install at night with a specific version because you're just saying device go and do it, just like a consumer update. So if you're saying keep him to 15.3, but I want to give notifications for all and allow standard users or disallow standard users, and I have that not set to keep to latest, I'm saying 15.3, go and set an enforcement specific declaration. Boom, we'll go and send that out. If I have it set to keep updated to latest, it's going to go and say, okay, do you have automatic actions turned on? Because again, to that point, it's going to go and do that when it has the automatic action point in time to go and do the download preparation and install. If you don't, it's going to say, okay, I'm going to use enforcement specific because I don't want to just have it go willy-nilly on that. I want to set it at this date and time. I don't want it to decide when it's going to go. If the auto actions is turned on, it's going to say, okay, what's my deferral? Do I want to have it go after 14 days? Great. Am I having those RSR updates enabled? Okay, great. Am I using Appleseed for IT as everybody should with the beta program? Great. Then it's going to go and send that global settings declaration, and then it will determine based off that machine learning device side, which if you're looking at the PDF from Apple, once you get access to that, it's called ML in multiple places instead of spelling it out. So if you're trying to search for it, so then it will go and run that. So that is a crash course on how all of the backend logic flows to allow for inheritance versus just having a policy for each of them.
And Bryce, we have 14 minutes left, so we may want to speed it up here.
Yeah, I know. I'm going. And I'll stay late for questions.
Yeah, we can do that.
So that's if you want to update. What if you're like that meme, which I forgot to put it in here, the meme of the guy that's like, no, get away from me. Well, if you want to defer it, there's a couple ways. One of them is the global settings that I just talked about, where you could have that deployed that way. The historical way of doing that for 12, 13, 14, and 15, if you're not pushing out those key values with the global settings, would be using the restrictions profile, where you're saying, I want to defer the visibility of these within system settings or the settings app. So it won't show for 1 to 90 days. Now, that doesn't mean the end user can't go to the App Store and go and run that update. The other component of that would be, and I know you got a poll to launch here, I see a little icon. The other option of that would be using the actual blocker application where it's going to go and say, okay, am I seeing the process for the App Store app to go and run to do that update? That will also kill that. So if you're trying to stop everything from happening, that restrictions profile and the blocker would be two things that you need to combine in that formula to get no prompting effectively on the device for that first 90 days where it's deferred and not shown. And also, if they go to the App Store and try an update, they're not going to get past that. And then you could also have the removal script take that off once you get past that point. You could take it off the policy as well. One other thing that also does is it will send a notification if the blocker is triggered. So it might be nice if you're trying to figure out, oh, this person went out to the App Store to go and get the downloader, or they used the command they found by Googling, saying, how do I get the full installer using the software update binary? They figured out how to get it. You would know when that .app is effectively being run then.
And I did launch that poll, and we've got about 53% participating. We need to get at least 60% before I close it. So please.
Okay.
Everyone answer.
Well, I'm going to keep moving because I got another flow chart.
Keep moving.
So that's great and all, but it doesn't always work that way because there's a lot of variables at play. And to give a little bit of background on it, this is a long flowing line of the story of my life for the last couple of years.
Yeah, this is where we might want to speed it up a bit on the slide.
Yeah.
Because we could spend
long story short, MDM updates came out 2023. They were working-ish, but we found that they weren't working great because the updates were getting stuck with the downloading or with the installation. So we started work pretty much immediately after we started getting a lot of reports of that on something called MDM Watchdog, which if you're a new customer since this last year, since about this time last year, you might not even know what this is. But what this is it's actually an agent that we were putting down on the device that was looking at a number of different things, saying, okay, what's the last status that I had? And we did a webinar on it too, which is on our site. And we go through literally step by step, what is the agent doing? But it's looking, seeing, okay, is the update for MDM client stuck trying to get the command? Is it stuck with the brain service, which is the downloader for the content of the update? If it's stuck with software update daemon where it can't actually run the installation. So we put that out in the product within, if you're Addigy enrolled, and that would go and remediate it effectively and kill the process, reboot it, clear the cache, clear the files, let it try again. Because we were finding if we did that enough times over and over, let's say you, again, and that's where we did the retry of 1 to 24 hours, we pair that with Watchdog and we say, okay, great, go ahead, try and update again. That was getting us much closer to that 80% range of success rate, were from the updates actually running on device. Then in May of 2023, we launched it as a standalone tool. So that way you could have that for any MDM. Doesn't matter. It's just a package. You deploy it. The agent runs. It does that. Then fast forward to June 2023, when WWDC happens, they launch the enforcement-specific declaration. We start work on that as soon as we get back from that and get our sessions with Apple. That comes out in October with a beta of that. And that's when we really saw the best success rate, because we were pairing the device doing that preparation weeks or months in advance and having that downloaded. And all the time, Watchdog was looking in the background. Oh, is the brain service or downloader stuck? Okay, reboot it, recycle it, clear it. Great. Oh, now it downloaded it, and then it goes and runs at that point in time. That was the golden age of the updates functioning when they were supposed to. Then when macOS 14.4 came out, we had a little bit of a problem where Apple killed the ability to launch or reboot, I should say, kickstart that service for software update daemon, along with a couple other things. I just put some links in chat there to go around it, as well as a link from one of our customers, which I think maybe Kevin's here. I've seen him in some chat somewhere in the last week. But 14.4 killed the ability for us to reload that. So from that point forward, then we kind of got stuck in this scenario where if it gets stuck, you need to reboot the device, which we're still there today. That hasn't changed. Apple did not go back on that. And there's some components for, oh, you're right. I am sending it to host and panelists, Ross. There.
Yeah.
So the updates from that point forward, then WWDC 2024, we get global settings, and that just launched on December 12th. So that's kind of a history of how we got where we are today. And we're hoping the global settings, because the device is, again, having more of that command to do it when it sees fit, and it's going to try multiple times. That'll help there. But that still doesn't help you if you have a device that's on a previous version or stuck there. So if you have Watchdog deployed today, if you're using not Addigy, or if you're using Addigy, it's deployed out of the box, you can still use Watchdog to help move the ball forward on this. Watchdog now, instead of being able to do that kickstart, whenever it sees it's stuck, it's going to generate a log file. You can configure it to do this. It does not do that out of the box for free space reasons, but you could configure Watchdog to go and say, oh, I see it's stuck, generate a log, and it's going to dump it into this directory. Because then, as I'll talk about in just a few slides, you can send that feedback to Apple to say, hey, this is where it got stuck, because really they got rid of Kickstart for a number of reasons, but the other part is they can't fix what they're not getting information and feedback from, which I understand that. So we pivoted Watchdog to be able to go and say, okay, make a logging event when it gets stuck there. Now, you still got a stuck device though. So how do you get it unstuck? The next steps that we have used in support and have found the best success with is a variation of what Watchdog was doing. We can't do all of it anymore, but removing the software update plist or making a duplicate of it with like an MV command where we make an old version of it so you can still have it to go back to, and then rebooting the device, which I know is super intrusive, but we have to do that in place of the kickstart because we can no longer kickstart that software to update daemon. And so we kind of get stuck on that. So the tools to do that are going to be your sysdiagnose, archive, MDM Watchdog, console app. When should you grab the logs? As soon as possible. As soon as you see failure, or if you have Watchdog grabbing that, you can go grab them from there. What does that look like in Addigy? So here's an example from a customer ticket that I was just working on a couple of weeks ago, where within that modal that I showed you earlier that you would see in any of the 3 flavors of updates, we now pass back those errors. That's one of the nice advantages of both flavors of declarative, is we get a lot more feedback from the device. So we're actually getting this error passed back from the software update controller on the device saying, hey, yeah, I couldn't do the update because the download failed. Try the update again and download it. Well, the device sometimes isn't smart enough to go in and do that. And you can see here, this device was on 14.4.1 after we couldn't do that kickstart. So by removing those, rebooting the device, boom, device goes through. It's able to do that update then when it's able to do so. Another scenario, this is actually of one of the other product managers that's currently on the panel here, where the declaration for 14.7.4, again, it was prepared, it was ready to go, but for whatever reason, it couldn't access that download and it couldn't make the recovery partition. So whenever an update is generated, it's going to go ahead and make a recovery partition that's going to say, okay, yes, this is the volume I'm going to boot to and install the update. And what I found when looking in the logs is that the mobile download daemon, where it's actually downloading those assets, it was having multiple connection failures where it couldn't pull it. And so apparently it didn't have all the files that it needed to do that. Again, what did we do? We removed the files, Selena rebooted, boom, device updated the next day then. So it's just one of those things of we don't have the watchdog to programmatically do that, but there are steps you can take when a device gets stuck. Last one of an example where it's working. So this is actually from one of my devices that we were looking at earlier that went and installed at 1:19 a.m. So we can see in the upper part of the log, that's when it's first started up. It says, I don't have a declaration. I'm going to go ahead and put down a declaration. What am I doing? I'm saying automatically download, automatically install, yes, 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 and go one day after. Then later on, the device was basically saying, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this. It tries to figure out, what do I have for battery, my battery charge level. This one is super long when it goes off the page, but bottom line is it says, I'm ready to go, and it goes and does that then. Okay, last thing, reporting issues. So if you run into some of these things, send feedback to Apple and let us know, and we can help you structure that feedback and send it to Apple too. Whenever we see any of these where they get stuck and we have the device side logs, having you, the customer, our mutual customer between us and Apple, make that feedback means all the difference in the world from just us seeming like the crazy people screaming from the mountaintop, which I am. But having that feedback to help make those updates better is so, so critical. I can't even begin to describe it. But again, Appleseed program, join the program. And that is very helpful.
Yes, send feedback to Apple, please. So as Bryce said, it's not just us giving Apple a hard time about
Yeah.
this stuff.
One that I want to make you aware of, this is what was actually being discussed in that super cool Mac admin Slack room from the Appleseed program between me and my counterpart at Kanji, as well as at Jamf and Mosel. You may have seen this where you get a prompt. This is actually from my device where it's saying, hey, put your password in and then to do the update. But I just let it go. I said, no, 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 I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. And then, hey, guess what? At December 14th, 2023 at 11 a.m., it went. It didn't need the password. And the feedback I got from Apple on the reply on that feedback was, well, you didn't have a bootstrap token, but I did, and I sent a screenshot of it. It's still something we've been running into since December of 2023. So please, please, please file feedbacks on this. Definitely something that we have seen and seen with other MDM vendors that I've been talking with. And it's not the best experience for an end user to get that prompt.
Yeah, yeah. Evan said such an annoying issue. I totally
Yes.
agree. Testing with my own family, it's frustrating to see that. And like you, Bryce, I kept hitting ignore, 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 and then it ran. So
And yeah, so it clearly doesn't need the password. It has the bootstrap token. It has what it needs, but it keeps asking for it for whatever reason. Last thing about updates and testing, physical devices, physical devices, physical devices, especially with the new global settings, just looking for that power state. So if you want to know what your end users are going to see, do it with a physical device, Silicon and Intel if you have a mix. Otherwise, Virtual Buddy is what we use internally for a lot of testing. It's what my team and the updates team uses. Works great. You just need to make sure that you're setting the power settings right and you're also turning off the screen lock. Otherwise, the global settings testing doesn't go so great, even if you're trying to mimic a desktop device, because the VM goes to sleep. Last thing, with a minute to spare, these are the
okay,
KB
yes.
links.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, Bryce, go on.
No, these
Minutes
are the KB
spare.
links. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, thanks. Fantastic. We squeezed it in here. We are going to go a little bit over because we still haven't given away our AirPods. But quick heads up, we've got these new K-Base articles. Check them out. And I do have one more poll. Let me launch it. This is the last one. Why can't I not launch it? Did I not kill the last one? Uh, Okay, there it is. No, I gotta, how to report. Sorry, guys. For some reason, I can't launch the last poll. Stop sharing. That's the problem. Launch the poll. The poll has been launched. Okay, so while that's going on, quickly recap. DDM is the future of Apple device security and compliance. Today, we saw how it keeps devices in the desired state. It enhances security. It makes system updates more efficient. It is complex, but we're trying to make it as simple as possible, and your feedback really helps. So, if you want to learn more, please let us know. We launched the poll. Let us know if we can help you out with that. And a huge thanks to Bryce for sharing his expertise and to all of you for joining us today. And for all the Q&A, we answered 16 questions. We have 23 open questions. We'll stay as long as we can to answer them. I will try to do a Q&A summary and post that for everyone to
Yep.
share.
Do you
And
want to do the giveaway before I do Q&A? Because
yes,
I'll
I thought
stay
we
as
should.
long as it takes for all the Q&A.
I think we'll do the giveaway right now since it's kind of mean to let
Sure.
people make them stay longer. So let me end that poll. Thank you very much for everyone who responded. We still have a lot of people here. That's great. End the poll. And I'm going to share my screen. Replace current share. Okay. Here we go. You guys see my screen? You see click to spin? Bryce, can you confirm you
Yep.
see my screen?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
I see
Okay, so
wheelofnames.com.
yeah, and there's a pretty good chance of winning. We didn't have a ton of people fill out the survey. Maybe we had 35, it looks like. So I'm going to spin the wheel. If you're here, you're going to respond to me in chat and you win. And if you're not here, we're going to move on to the next person. So here we go. Hope no one has a seizure looking at this.
The lag is tremendous.
Oh, the lag is tremendous.
Yeah.
So Bob Austin, are you present? We're gonna give Bob a minute to respond. Never, yeah, I see some people didn't get the survey. Um, I would imagine that's an email filtering issue. That's my guess. Bob Austin, he's here. Okay, congratulations, Bob. You won. And please send me your contact information. Just DM the team, or if you're on Slack, DM me. We'll reach out to you. We'll find you. Okay, thank you for that. Now let's jump into the Q&A.
Yep. Let me switch back here. I like having the slides because sometimes I like
I want to
to.
also, while you're getting the Q&A ready, a lot of people were asking about Nudge, and we use Nudge, and I know Ross is here. Ross continues to use Nudge. You know, Nudge doesn't actually install or push any updates like DDM does, right? Nudge is literally just
Yeah,
a visual
it's just
prompt.
notifying you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just notifying the end user that they really need to restart their machine. And people are asking, should they use it? Well, yeah, if your users are still fighting you with DDM, it probably doesn't hurt to have a nice, friendly little nudge. And I think Ross shared earlier his kind of formula, which was MDM and DDM and nudge and software updates MDM profile. Which did we mention that, Bryce, or is that too?
No, no, I was able to fit the three flavors in, and that's about it.
Okay. But yeah, I think layering on an extra communication with nudge is pretty harmless. If it's done right, obviously you don't want to nudge people into submission, but you want to gently remind them. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, so let me I'm gonna start answering some Q&A here. I
And here's Nudge,
will
a link to Nudge. Certainly a cool
so
open source app.
one of the questions here, Stephen Jenkins asked, can you still review the updates in mass and not go device by device? Which I don't know when this was asked because I was fighting for my life to try and get everything out of my mouth. But yes, if you go into the policy and click on the policy deployment, you can click on the tabs like I have on screen here for the MDM updates and the DDM updates where you can actually see you filter by whatever version it is. You click on that version, it will expand and show you all the devices that are in there and what status they're in. Green if they're completed. In this case, I only had one device in the policy. It'll show yellow when it is still in progress of doing that. Next question, Gregory. I'm curious, do system updates, DDM or MDM, need to be in the parent policy or the policy of the device? Can be either. So when we were looking at that flow chart, basically saying, what path is it going to take and what's the most restrictive, it's effectively saying which one has the most restrictive, least intrusive end user calculation of when it's going to run and also version to take place. And it's going to go ahead and do that. So it can be in either of them. And like I said, there's a number of customers that they use flex policies at the parent level where they're saying, I want to go do everything that's 14 on this, and that flex policy does updates, and then that device does not get anything else policy-wise for updates. It could be in and inheriting other policies, but it does not get updates from them. It's only set within that flex for just that OS version. Question from Daniel. In DDM testing, some of our laptops ran part of the update overnight, but upon opening the next day, continued to do the rest of the update with the black logo. Ways to avoid that? No, and my Intel devices did that. I did wind up sending feedback to Apple, though. My devices came out of it, but I did have a number of reports early 15 beta testing where it just did not when it's doing the global settings. So something to definitely report to Apple. Joden, what is the best case for pushing updates specifically for macOS 14 to 15 with a defer option for the users? So that's going to be using you could turn off declarative and use the MDM like you're talking about, where you see the option for 12 to 13. But like I talked about, and the number of Apple feedbacks you file on that, not super reliable device side. It doesn't always run. The enforcement specific declaration, where you'd give them a time 30 days out, would be probably your best bet, because within that 30-day window, there is, and let's see if I have the chart handy, but basically, if you give them 30 days with enforcement specific, what's going to happen is that device is going to get a prompt when it gets the declaration. Then it's going to get a prompt, cut that time in half at 14 days. Then it's going to get a prompt with 24 hours to go. And then it's going to get a prompt hourly after that. And then it's going to get a prompt. I think, is that what you just put in chat there, Ben?
No, I put the other chart, but I'll put that one in there too.
Oh, that's not, it's not in the slides. It's a different chart. It's in that, it's actually, again, going back to that PDF from Apple. It's in that, and they've shared it at WWDC. Actually, it's in one of their presentations they had done there. So that's not under NDA. I'm trying to see if I can find it. But long story short, that's going to give you multiple prompts where they'll be told about it, but there isn't really a deferral with it, because once it gets to the enforcement time after that 30 days, it's going to go and do it. Okay, a question from Sam. For the force X number of days, do we know which update it's counting from? Yes. So when you're looking at the, is it in this one? I can't see, I got too many windows open here. So right here where it's saying keep updated to latest, it's got that current version with the build number underneath it with that radial button that is updated at the top of every hour on an internal cron job catalog that we do internally. And it's going to say, okay, what's the maximum this device can get? So if that device is on, let's say 15.0, 15.3.1 is the latest, and you can just jump straight to 15.3.1, it's going to do that. If you're in a scenario, and this is a limitation Apple side that's called out in their documentation, if you're on, let's say 14.7.1 and you want to go to a version after that, you need to do each version in between it. They don't really have a combo updater version of that. So it's going to calculate from the latest date, send it, try and get it caught up, and then get you up to that point. Next question from Scott. With DDM, what happens when an end user sleeps their device minutes before the forced restart? In the scenario of enforcement specific, it's probably unless they have power nap turned on, which I have seen it go sometimes on power nap. It seems like global settings is a little bit better at that. It's going to wait until they bring it back up because it's not going to run effectively. Now, if the countdown had finished and they shut the lid and it's plugged into power, it will continue and complete that on there. Next question from Ryan. Can you confirm a scenario? Say we enable DDM for a new policy, set it to a max of 15.3.1, and set the time frame as 7 days. If 15.3.1 has been out for greater than 7 days, it would go on a force install itself, right? Yes. So in the scenario, let's say I have 14 days set here on the one that's on screen right now. And I have it set to keep updated to latest, and 15.3.1 came out 15 days ago. If I go and hit save, what's going to happen is it's going to go, whoa, 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 you're past due. You need to install right now. It's going to give them 1 hour. And this is in a previous pseudo talk, I think like 3 or 4 pseudo talks ago. We kind of went through that flow chart. I was just describing one of the previous questions. It's going to give them 60 minutes basically to do that update because they're past due. So it's one of those things of you'd want to set that when the devices are at that version, or you're saying keep updated to latest and you're starting from that point forward there. Question from Sam about Nudge, like we talked about. Yeah, if it's a good fit for you and configuring it, it's one of those things that I would like to see if we could integrate that somehow. But right now, the problem with a lot of the declarations, and specifically really global settings, there's no feedback really, unless the device starts the update. Like we can see it's preparing it, but there's no bi-directional communication related to specifically prompting the end user using that.
Yeah, I want to also highlight the fact that the most successful companies I've seen where they successfully keep their computers up to date, even though they leverage all of these tools that are available in Addigy, they also have a security awareness culture of communication and building that awareness that end users must keep their devices up to date. And that's going above and beyond what most IT teams do. You have to go out into your customers if you're an MSP, or if you're internal IT, you have to educate your users that the why it's important to protect them personally from any type of, bad actors out there by keeping their devices up to date. And then when they understand that, they're more likely to find time to restart their computer.
Mhm.
Most people don't
Yeah.
talk about that. They rely on this type of automation, and people just keep hitting the ignore button.
Yep. Yep. Question from Sandy about if the device is offline and is scheduled to run, it'll be prompted when it comes back. Yes, you get 60 minutes when it comes back online. However, one thing I found, if you reboot it before that 60 minutes, and I sent this to Apple and they said this is working as expected. And I said, okay. If you reboot it before the 60 minutes, like within like the last 10 minutes, the counter starts over again when you come back up. So it's funny because most end users don't reboot their device, but if you wanted to, you could just keep rebooting every 58 minutes and it would never actually install. So let's see here. Another question from Sandy there about the beta updates. You would need to have your ADE token in that policy. So it's going to be in whatever the policy you have your ADE token from the Appleseed. So like, and this is something I ran into that was just an honest mistake some people have run into previously, where they have one program that's like their Appleseed for like their testing, but it's not in their production ADE token. They have multiple tokens, different DUNS numbers or different organizations. And well, it needs to be in the device you're using needs to be in that ADE token in that policy for it to show. Question from Ross about the software updates MDM profile and how it fits into this. Should you stop using it if we're using the updates within Addigy? No, there's still a place for it. Global settings changes that a little bit. That question I think will be a little bit more clear after WWDC this year, assuming that we see an expansion of global settings and also just through attrition as devices wind up being on those newer versions.
Yeah, Bryce, I was going to suggest maybe we wrap it up in 1 minute, although we still have over 100 people here. So if we can try to finish all the questions.
I was going to try and go to 20 after the hour at least.
Okay, let's do that. 20 after the hour.
Yeah.
We'll try to get through these.
I'm trying to answer questions that I didn't cover necessarily in the slides, but I'm trying to read through them.
And if any, I know we have some other people from the team, product managers helping out with questions if anyone wants to unmute or jump in.
Oh, here's another one about Appleseed that I didn't cover. Is there a way to get the beta updates approved and pushed if you don't have Appleseed? Yes, but it's not. Let me see. It's on the next page here. You'll see there's a checkbox at the very bottom here about push beta updates legacy. macOS 14 did not have the Appleseed program built in. That's only macOS 15 and up. So macOS 14, one of our engineers came up with a hodgepodge, elegant way of pulling from the device what you're enrolled to. So if you go into your settings app on your device and sign in with your Appleseed or your Apple developer program, Apple ID, that device is going to see those updates. So we were able to curl those back using the available updates command and then send a declaration for that. However, that is only macOS 14. Long story short of why we didn't do it again on 15 is we got some guidance directly from some engineers at Apple, like don't cross the streams, don't push a enforcement specific. Well, we also have the offer program out there because you could wind up where the offer program winds up with a newer version if they push one in between it, and it can't downgrade, and it would just kind of get really weird. So yes, with an asterisk of macOS 14, you can do that, which there are still betas that come out for that. Let's see here. Another question from Ross about global settings. Are those only available if you have things set to the newest? Yes. So let me go back to my beautiful flow chart, which I will be putting a version of this somehow in the KB. Um, but yeah, basically those settings are available if you want to use notifications and the user major minor. And if you don't want to use keep updated to latest. If you use keep updated to latest, then you're going to not use the enforcement specific and you're going to have to do auto actions, deferrals, and RSR. Because again, don't cross the streams. If we send a declaration for the auto action that's taking place, and then it maybe down the road, if enforcement specific gets expanded, maybe we'll be able to do both of those. But at this point in time, you'd have to do for keep updated to latest. You'd wind up doing auto actions on macOS 15 if you do hold to a specific version, which could even still be the latest version. You could punch in 15.3.1 into the keep to latest, and it's going to be able to do enforcement specific there while still giving you the notifications and the admin versus standard user control. Mm-hmm. Oh, here's a good question about I think there was a second one here about the updates if you're at the login window. Yeah, there's two of them here from Gregory and Steven. Yeah, enforcement specific, it's not going to go because it needs to notify the end user. Global settings with the auto actions, I haven't done that many tests because it takes a while for the device to learn. It takes a couple of weeks of setting a device up, and I need to not touch it. But it did go on my Intel physical MacBook and my Silicon physical Mac Mini because it just had the automatic action to do that at the login window. Now, granted, I had logged in and logged out because I was remoted in, so maybe that muddies the waters a bit on that, but I have seen that go with global settings. Oh, here's another. Adam had the same question there. Let's see. Question from Brian. I've been seeing this in the installer log for some client computers, a DDM configured policy, MDM client software update service daemon, conflicts with MDM command with completion, MDM conflicts. Gonna need a little bit more context in that sentence. But it could be if you have the deferrals profile in place, but it shouldn't because that should blow by it. Yeah, which is a sidebar. If you have the deferrals MDM profile in place and you send a command to go to a newer version, it's going to go and do that. But maybe there's something going wrong with that there. That would maybe be my line of investigation, sysdiagnose and see if you can pinpoint when you would go and hit deploy policy when it's supposed to go and do it, if it's getting that command I'm sorry, rather that declaration. And when you get to that enforcement time, see if we can replicate that on demand and look for the needle in the haystack in that. Question
We
from
got one more minute. Last question. Here we go.
I'm going to see if I can get these last two.
Okay.
Question from Ace, blocking functionality to be removed, push it to a policy, removed it from policy. Doesn't always remove all parts. There is the script for that. that one, I would want to look at that one a little bit more closely because the script should remove that. Last one then, in our time we got with Brent, combination of policy level settings, settings on top of that, machines, live policy, configured. For our devices, we are doing the enforcement specific and global settings based off of the different versions. I don't
Sorry,
know.
what's the question, Bryce?
It's asking about our internal production policy, what we're setting, the policy level settings for updates, deploying the MDM profile. We are deploying the MDM deferral profile on our devices that are on 14 and older and all that internally. And then the global settings, I think we are pushing those. I see Ponce on here. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs
And
down.
Ponce is asking people to restart their machines. I noticed that.
Yes, yes. We are now doing a 21-day restart because there is no kickstart in MDM Watchdog. Cool. All right.
Well,
That's everything.
Bryce, thank you. Great job on the hot seat there, answering all those questions. And thank you for all the work you put into this presentation. Thank you for everyone who joined us and remained until the end. And congratulations to our AirPods winner. We'll see you next time on the next SudoTalks. Bye.
Yes. Thank you, everybody.